I, 28M, am the success story of my family, which basically means I'm the designated ATM for my parents and my younger brother, 25M. I work in high-frequency trading, putting in 80-hour weeks, while my brother is the golden child who spends his time finding himself on my dime. My parents have spent years guilt-tripping me into funding my brother's business ventures, which are usually just high-end gaming rigs or trips to Ibiza. 6 months ago, my father called me acting all humble. He said my mother was turning 60 and they wanted to throw a black tie gala at the Grand Regency. He claimed they were short on the deposit, so I agreed to pay. Then came the catering, the open bar, and a $3,000 designer dress my mother needed. By the time the party arrived, I had sunk over $20,000 into this event. My brother's only job was to pick up the $450 custom cake I'd already paid for. An hour before the party started, my brother called saying his car wouldn't start, and I had to grab the cake. I should have known it was a lie, but I went. I arrived at the venue and walked through the back entrance to avoid ruining the frosting. As I passed the private dressing room, I heard my family laughing inside. I stopped when I heard my brother say, "Did you see his face when I told him the security deposit was $5,000?" My father chuckled and replied, "It was only 2, you idiot. Don't get greedy or he'll check the receipts. We've already cleared $8,000 in overages he sent us. That's your new car down payment right there." Then my mother chimed in about how the venue gave them a kickback on the catering I paid for, and they were splitting the cash. I stood there holding this expensive cake that said, "To the woman who gave me everything," realizing my family was running a coordinated embezzlement scheme against me. They had inflated every invoice and were using my hard-earned money to buy my brother a car. I didn't storm in. I've learned in my job that the loudest person is usually the one losing the trade. I walked back to my car, put the cake in the passenger seat, and called my bank's fraud department. Since I'd paid these vendors via corporate transfers under the guise of event gifting, a move my dad suggested for taxes, I knew how to freeze the funds. I walked into the ballroom empty-handed. My brother immediately demanded, "Where's the cake?" "No hello, no thanks for coming." I told them the bakery said there was a payment issue, and the card was flagged. My father paled and told me to just go sit down. Instead, I walked straight to the microphone. The room was packed with 200 people, family, friends, and my father's business associates. I announced that I wanted to make a speech. My father tried to grab my arm, whispering for me to get off the stage, but I ignored him. "I'd like to introduce the real guest of honor," I told the crowd. "My brother's new car." I laid it all out. I told everyone that while my father told me the party cost $40,000, the manager had just confirmed the actual bill was $18,000. I asked my dad, into the mic, where that extra $22,000 went. The room went dead silent. My brother started yelling that I was a liar and jealous because our parents actually liked him. I looked at him and said, "I don't think I can buy your love, but I know I've been buying your life." That startup I funded? It didn't exist. It was a lease on a luxury apartment in your name that Dad tricked me into co-signing. My father lunged at the podium, screaming that I was no son of his. I looked at the crowd and told them about the Parent Plus loans they took out in my name and the way they were liquidating my bank account while pretending it was their retirement fund. Then came the kicker. I told them I'd placed a stop payment on the final check for the catering and the bar. Since they'd told me they were splitting the costs, I told the venue manager to collect the remaining $10,000 from my father. My mother started her typical performative wailing, screaming that I was ruining her birthday. My brother shouted that I was legally obligated to pay because the contracts were in my name. I laughed and told him that since Dad had me sign as an independent benefactor with a clause regarding invoice padding, a clause I wrote, the agreement was null and void the moment they lied about the costs. The guests started leaving in the most awkward silence I've ever witnessed. My mother stopped crying and looked at me with pure hatred, telling me I owed them this money because they raised me. My father begged me not to call the police because it would ruin his reputation. I told him he ruined it himself the moment he used my electronic signature to authorize those overages. But it got worse for them. I'd run a credit check 2 days prior and found 2 maxed-out credit cards in my name registered to their house. My father had been stealing my identity to fund their lifestyle. I told them right there that they had 24 hours to get out of the house. My mother screamed that it was their home. I reminded her that the house was owned by the Trust One Fund. The lease they signed stated that defrauding the grantor, me, was a breach of contract. I told them they were now trespassers. The next morning, the security team I hired was at the house. My brother was on the lawn throwing a tantrum next to his designer sneakers. My father was inside, looking like a ghost because the police had already been by to ask about the fraudulent credit card applications. They tried to bargain. My father offered to leave quietly if I dropped the charges. I told him I don't drop felony wire fraud charges, the DA does. I gave them 2 hours to pack. I told them they could keep what they bought with their own money, but everything else, the furniture, the jewelry, the art, stayed to be liquidated to pay off the debt they put in my name. They left in a U-Haul I paid for, headed to my aunt's basement in Ohio. My brother flipped me off, and my mother wouldn't even look at me. I stood in that empty, expensive house and felt nothing but relief. I've since sold the property and cut all contact. My father's consulting firm collapsed once the news of the party spread, and my brother is now working a warehouse job. I didn't lose my family that night. I just finally stopped paying for the privilege of being cheated by them. If you enjoyed seeing a golden child lose his shine and get a U-Haul instead of a luxury car, feel free to subscribe. I promise I won't try to skim $8 grand off your sub.